Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maureen Moore, and I will be one of the presenters for today's webinar, Effective Ways to Market Yourself as a Mining Professional. This webinar was originally geared towards students in our Maptek University program, but we welcome all other mining professionals that are looking for ways to market themselves. Before we get started, let's look at the outline for today's session. We'll go over some introductions for the Maptek University team, discuss how you can search for mining industry internships, co-ops, or even full-time jobs. And we're going to go into some detail on how you can better market yourself, go over some interview skills, and then open it up for a question and answer. So we do really want to make sure towards the end of this that we're able to have some engaging conversations with you and provide some additional feedback or tips or tricks that maybe aren't included in this outline. All right, so with some introductions, like I said, my name is Maureen Moore. I am a senior geologist and the North American Training Program lead at Maptek. I've been here for about 6.5 years, but I've been a geologist in the industry for over 13 years within a variety of roles. I'll hand it over to Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann McCall. I'm a mining engineer on our technical sales support team here in Canada. I've also worked at Maptek for 6.5 years, and originally I started in Colorado, the same office Maureen is in, and then was able to transition to our Vancouver, Canada office. So to start things off today, we wanted to talk about how you guys are currently searching for industry jobs. So we have a poll question for you guys. How are you currently searching for industry jobs, whether they be internships or full-time employment?
Alrighty, so it looks like most people are using LinkedIn or Indeed, and we'll have more discussions later in the session. And if you have any other, it looks like no one selected other, but if you think of other ways that you think you're searching for jobs, you can always go ahead and put it in the chat box too, just to kind of share it with the group. Alrighty, so with all the technology we have at our fingertips, you would think that searching for jobs would be easier and easier, but a lot of times when we have too many options, it makes it a bit more difficult. So my preference whenever I'm looking for a job is to research the actual companies that you might be interested in and develop an understanding of why you're interested in that company and what projects or what job roles. It's also really important to talk to your industry mentors, and if you don't really have any, no worries. You can always talk with your professors. You can always reach out to Anne or I if there's a specific topic that interests you. We probably have someone in our network that we can kind of pass on for you to start getting mentored on. So they do have, there's official mentorship programs, and a lot of times anyone you work with will provide some mentorship or some tips and tricks or something to use in your career path. And then you do want to leverage your professor's connections. So sometimes you go to a college that is actually well connected and have a lot of industry connections. And then other times you don't. So you have to kind of make your own. So it's not, a deal breaker if you're not coming from some of those top schools that has a lot of industry connections. And the other thing too is that don't be afraid to work for a temp agency. A lot of companies these days will hire some folks from temp agencies, and then it may not be the normal route, but you'll work with the team to see if you like it, if they like you and the projects. And it's a great way to really understand what potential jobs you might be interested in. Because what you learn in school and then what you actually get to do when you're out in the field, it may be very different.
So one of the key things when you're searching for a job is that you want to make yourself as marketable as possible. And one of the ways to do this is to make sure that you're visible in the industry. So when we're talking about visibility, we're talking about things like reaching out to industry professionals. You really want to establish yourself in the industry. You want to get to know some big names, ideally some people in your local mining community or industry community that can help you. That's also a good way to develop some people who might be able to mentor you. But also you can be active on LinkedIn. You can reach a very broad audience with LinkedIn, internationally even, and especially right now when we don't have meetups in person so much these days, having a strong LinkedIn social media online presence for your professional self is a really important piece of that and developing your brand. Another key thing that you can do to start getting your name out there and starting to get a little bit of recognition in the industry is to present at conferences whenever possible, most of which again are online virtual conferences right now, but having your name on some papers and just starting to liaise with some people in the industry is a really good way to get yourself out there. And as you're doing all of this, you want to make sure that you have confidence in your skill set, and anything that you maybe aren't quite as confident on, just express a willingness to fill any gaps in your knowledge while you're on the job. So if you are really good at a particular skill, but you're kind of weak on something else, it's okay, especially if you're in an interview and they're asking, are you familiar with this skill that they're looking for, right? It's okay to be honest with your interviewers and say, actually, I'm not really familiar with that, but I'm interested in learning about that. I have a willingness to learn, that kind of thing. And then, of course, too, as a student, you want to make yourself really marketable, and you have a lot of opportunities to do so, whether it's through the use of free or discounted training that you may be able to get through your school, or just like as a student. Some companies will offer free or discounted training to you. Maptek is one of them. There's also free or discounted software access, so just becoming familiar with the software that's used in industry. A lot of job postings and things will say what kind of software that the company uses, so you can try to brush up your skills and see, if you're going to be a good fit in that job with the software access you can have as a student. And then again, attending conferences or virtual conferences or virtual local industry meetings whenever possible, just trying to get it again into the industry and start to meet people. You can have reduced membership fees a lot of times as a student. So it's really good to take advantage of that whenever possible. And then lastly, I would say as a good way to make yourself marketable is just really make sure that your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile is top notch. Look for spelling errors and grammar things, especially if maybe English isn't your first language and you're searching for an English speaking job. You want to really make sure that you are taking the time to make sure that looks professional. There's a few ways you can do that. You can always just have someone proofread. It could be your mom, but unless she's in the industry that you're trying to find a job in, you maybe want to find someone who also knows more than just the proofreading side, but also kind of knows what employers might be looking for and how to really show your skill sets in a really positive light that will be attractive to possible employers.
Awesome. Next, we're going to go into personal brands. And here we have, I'll go through my example. But one way to make yourself marketable is to kind of develop your own personal brand. What makes you different than the rest of the people that you're interviewing with, or hopefully getting to the interview stage? You don't necessarily have to come from the exact same school or the right background and stuff. If you show your willingness to learn and put yourself out there and be able to kind of roll with challenges, that's going to set you apart from everybody else. So here are some kind of examples of just like my personal brand that I like to portray, whether I'm in presenting at a conference or helping on a session chair or in the field with my colleagues or on personal time going in caves. I try to explain to everyone I'm around just, what I'm really passionate about, and that is rocks and educating people. So, and then I also try to work with a lot of these organizations. So if any of these interest you or you want to learn more about it, let me know. But this is my personal brand.
And then my personal brand, I'm not exactly sure how I would characterize it, but there's some combination for me of representing myself both in fieldwork situations and settings, as well as like an office professional, since a lot of what I do right now with Maptek is in an office setting, and I'm doing a lot more of that than fieldwork. So, kind of deciding where you want your career path to go, whether you want to work at a mine or maybe you want to work in a related industry or as some kind of service to the industry, using that to help establish your brand and who you're marketing to can be really powerful. And you really want to try to tailor your brand to the specific job that you're looking for, like what kind of thing that's interesting to you and where you might want to take your career. So that's kind of how I try to market myself. I also do that with LinkedIn. The next slide will show here that in my About section, this is a place where a lot of people will talk about the technical skills that they have. They'll say, like, I'm a mining engineer with X amount of years of knowledge and like I've done this, this, and this, and I excel at mine planning or whatever. For me, I usually have all that information a little bit further down on my LinkedIn profile from all my jobs. Like I list my jobs and I've listed what I did in each of those roles. So all that information is there. And so what I use my about section, because this is like the first thing people read on LinkedIn, this is where I really try to present myself and how I view myself in the industry in more of like a soft skill set kind of way. So I would like to talk about, how do I work with others and what do I like to do? Like what gets me passionate about my work? Because they'll see all the technical skills later on when they're interested. But this is just a good way, I think, for me to represent myself outside of just who am I on a paper resume? Like who am I a little bit more personally? What kind of interaction might you be able to expect to have with me based on this information here? So we are kind of curious to know how you guys are developing your personal brand. Do you think like you have a pretty well developed personal brand or not at all? Go ahead and answer in the poll. So it looks like a lot of you are saying, at least everyone has some sort of personal brand developed, probably like a LinkedIn or something. Maybe it's not that filled out. It doesn't look like anyone's like, oh man, I'm 100% there. Like I'm doing the best I can at marketing myself. But that's good. That gives you a chance to improve. That's likely why you're here today, is to learn about some other things you can do. So I hope some of the tips that I mentioned about how you present yourself in terms of your LinkedIn profile and who you are in the industry. Hopefully that can help some of you guys develop your own personal brand as well. But it's good to see that you're thinking about this and this is something that you're working towards. So keep up that effort. All right. So when we are talking about interviewing, we want to talk about some different interview skills and things you might want to do when you're going to have an interview. So the one that everyone always hears all the time is do your homework on the company you're applying to. Well, why do you want to do that? I would say top 3 reasons is because you want to understand the company's mission and goals. First of all, you want to make sure that that aligns with you and your values and what you want in a career. You want to understand things about their projects. Are they going to be projects that are interesting to you, or is it just going to be a paycheck? And finally, you really want to understand the job you're applying for. You want to make sure you go in and you're knowledgeable about the requirements, the things that you fulfill really well, the places where, maybe you do have a deficit. And to give you a personal example, when I started at Maptek, I had never used Vulkan software before. Like that was the job I was applying for, is to like go and teach people how to use Vulkan. And I had never used the software. I still got the job because I expressed a willingness to learn, because I had experience in other mining softwares, and I was able to demonstrate that I could easily apply that knowledge and that I had other transferable skills, like being able to teach people software from a TA position I had while I was an undergrad. So really try, as you do that, when you're trying to tailor your message to your interviewer about how you're a good fit for the job you're applying for, really try to see what experiences you have that can fit into the things they're looking for, checking their boxes, so to speak. Another thing you can do to really help improve your interview skills is to practice with someone who's in the industry, whether it's an industry mentor or even other people at your university. It could be a professor, it could be your advisor, it could be just other students. Just practice getting in front of people and talking and explaining who you are, your elevator pitch, if you will, just so you're more familiar with what you would want to say in a higher pressure situation like an interview. And then, of course, a lot of schools will have a university career center. You can always go to them for assistance, and they can help with all sorts of things, whether it's practicing interview skills or developing your resume, all sorts of things like that. So that's always a really good resource to use in that case. Lastly, I would say, for what I would consider important for going into an interview, is to see if you can find someone that you have some connection to who either works for the company you're applying to or has previously interviewed at that company, even if they didn't get the job. And the reason why I find this to be really important is because when I was applying to Maptek, I actually had someone who previously interviewed with Maptek who let me know a specific interview question that they asked. He told me, like, make sure you know the answer to this question because they'll ask it. And he was 100% right. They asked that question and I had researched it and I like found the answer and I knew what it was. And then when it came up in the interview, I was able to impress my interviewers. So if you know someone, whether it's someone you've worked with before, like through an internship, or someone maybe a professor could connect you with, and you can ask them a little bit about like what is that company's interview process like. You will have a pretty good chance of getting some answers that are going to help. And then also, I would totally recommend if you do get that and you get that job, always pay it forward. Someday you will have someone else come to you and ask you, what is the interview process like? And then you can give them all the sweet tips if you think they're going to be a good match for the job. So always try to pay that forward too if you can. So that's what I've got for interview skills.
Thanks, Anne. So the next thing we're going to kind of talk about is mock interview questions or things you should be ready for during the interview process. So depending on what job you're applying for, if you're applying for a technical role, you need to be prepared to use the instruments of your trade. So buttons aren't going away. You really want to make sure that you understand how to use that. For our geos, they will likely make you go into the field and see how you are. Can you use a hammer without hurting yourself? Are you able to properly use a hand lens and identify the basic minerals that you're going to potentially be working on? So at the interview stage, you should be able to know more or less what are those things that they might be asking. Or again, work with your network or developing network to understand what those things could be. For survey, again, there's going to be a lot of instruments. So be aware of what those might be and also learn how to use them if you have the capacity right now, or at least be aware of what those are. If you've never used a LiDAR or a drone, you should be at least aware of what that is, because you will probably be asked at a high level, can you explain what is LiDAR and how is it used? For engineers, as a geologist, I always have to poke fun at engineers, right? They use mostly spreadsheets and software. For most job descriptions, they'll tell you what sort of software you should be ready to use or be willing to use. All those are around now, so you may not be ready to get a job this year, but why not look at those descriptions and start learning those different tools now? It's assumed if you're getting in the interview stage that you have the technical background. A lot of questions in a lot of interview process I've been involved in revolve around the soft skills or emotional intelligence. If you're not really sure what those are, definitely there's lots of really good ebooks or free books online or material. But basically, it's how do you engage with other people? Can you understand how to communicate effectively with different personalities? If you're able to teach that and practice that now, it's going to be huge, because you could be the smartest person, the highest technically found person, but if you can't communicate your thoughts, that knowledge is wasted. So you really want to take the time. I know a lot of you are probably going to technical schools. Make sure that you take the time to learn the soft skills, whether it's in a class or seminars and stuff. Yeah, do take that time. And then understand your strengths and weaknesses. So a lot of times in most interviews, they'll ask, what is your strengths? What are your weaknesses? No one is perfect by any means. When I get this question, I always like to say, well, I like a lot of humor. So I always say, yeah, well, my strengths, my manager probably thinks that's great, but my weaknesses, my coworkers might find a little intense, so that could be a weakness, right? So it depends on where you are using those and understanding who you are as a person, because it'll be easier to kind of be confident and find what you really want if you understand who you are. So, and then also don't be afraid to ask questions of your interviewer. It's usually expected. Remember, you are trying to understand what that community is like, what projects you're going to be working on, and you want to make sure it's a good fit, right? I know right now we're in kind of a different time frame where people are a bit more desperate because there may be not as many jobs, but you do want to make sure, even in the most desperate times, that you take the time to think about how will this work out for me in the long term, and think about the strategy of where you want to go in your career and be very confident in that, and don't be afraid to ask. Don't be upset if you don't get, have your career path right as you always want it, but things normally work out when you put the time in and you're open to challenges. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of summarize, and then we're going to open it up to question and answer. So if you guys have some questions, start thinking about them, and we're going to have you write them in the chat box. But to summarize, you have to do the work. You can't just apply for a job. You might be able to do really well on the cover letter and the resume and stuff, but you really do need to make sure that you're doing the work and you can back up your technical skills or everything you have in your cover letter or your resume. Really make sure you diversify your skill set. So make sure you have your technical skills, your soft skills. Just make sure that you have kind of a well-rounded life if possible. Experience things just because you don't have the technical experience, like Ann said, being a TA or being able to help out in your community, that can translate to a lot of jobs. Be confident in what you know and what you don't want, or what you don't know, and really, be open to learning stuff. So try really, really hard to not use the phrase, oh, I know that, in the first 6 months of your career. I think that really was probably the best advice I've gotten from some of my mentors. And also really try to build up your network of folks that can help you mentor, get mentorship, or be a mentor to other students you're working with or colleagues, and accept any kind of advice, because I don't think advice is ever really bad. You may not take it directly, but you're able to use that for future experiences. And then make sure that you're applying for the jobs for the right reason. Hopefully, the right reason is to find a rewarding career that is sustainable through the ups and downs of the mining cycle. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to questions. So again, hopefully everyone's able to see the chat box. What we'll do is we will allow you guys to go ahead and enter some questions. We'll read them out loud, and then if you want to discuss further, you can unmute yourself. But to kind of make this discussion a little bit more coherent, we'll have you write your question and then you can unmute yourself. Or if your question's long-winded and you want to just have us have you just ask the question, just make a note in the chat box. And while we're waiting, because it looks like we have a few people potentially typing, we'll do our last poll right now as well. Hopefully that won't kind of confuse you, but we do want to understand if you guys have started the process, right? So you may not have a lot of questions if you really haven't started that process. So it looks like, yes, so about almost 86% of people have gone ahead and started applying. So that's great. And we have some questions coming up. So first question, so I'm applying for my first industry job. Do you have any tips to help me determine that the job I'm applying for is a good fit for me and the company? So how we'll do this, I'll go first, and then Anne, if you have anything else to add to that, then we can kind of go from there. So my first thing is I try to envision what, if I got the job, do I actually see myself living in the area that the mine is in, right? For example, so let's say I'm applying for a job that's really far out. Do I actually think it's going to be realistic for me to be working there? Do I have the skill sets for the task at hand? And also, what are the what are the company mission and what are they about, right? So if I think I'm going to be working for there, and you want to also interview or talk with people that work there, right? So they can have a great mission, but then when you talk to the team members, it may not be the same. And
Yeah, I really second what Maureen says, especially like with location and hours and things, like does that fit your schedule and your life? And like for me, that's like a pretty personal thing because I was most of the way through my degree for mining engineering when I realized, oh, I don't want to live in Elko, Nevada or some far away town in the middle of nowhere and have to get up for a 6 a.m. bus to a mine. Like I realized, oh, that's not what I want to do. And I was really afraid when I realized that because that's what a lot of jobs in the industry are. So I started to look at companies that work in the mining industry but aren't directly like jobs at a mine. And that's how I ended up finding Maptek. And for me, I just knew it was like a perfect fit. It was exactly where I wanted to be. It was close to home. It gave me a lot of opportunities to learn about a bunch of different aspects of the industry, whether it was different commodities and how you mine them, or different fields such as geology and engineering and survey. It was a really good place for me to diversify my skill set. And I was able to see that early on, which helped me to know that Maptek was going to be a really good fit. And I've been here for 6.5 years, which it's my first job I've had out of school. And it's pretty rare to stay at your first job that long. Most people these days are making it like 2 to 3 years. So, sometimes you just know when it's the right fit.
awesome. So it looks like we have another question from Dean. How would you suggest going about getting an industry mentor? So I guess what I would suggest is working first, asking your professor because they should be an industry mentor. Depending on your discipline, there's like for geology, Society of Economic Geologists has a whole page of industry mentors. For engineering, and geology, you can go to SME. So I think it basically where I've always got my mentors are from the professional organizations I belong to or tried to belong to. And then also when I go to these virtual or in-person conferences, I do try to meet people and they may not know I'm their, like that they're my mentor, but I ask questions and just kind of try to have a personal and professional relationship with them. So hopefully that answers it. And do you have anything else to add there? Any tips?
No, I think that was great.
And then if any of you are looking for mentors and you just don't know where to start, we'll provide our information. You can email us and we can kind of help you through that process. Great. And Judith, how do you determine if a job is good fit for you? So hopefully the one earlier kind of helped answer that, but really, I think Anne really hit on the head there, where you basically have to kind of think about, do you see yourself working there? Can you build your community? Do you think long term you're going to be challenged there, right? Because in certain situations you may not know too. So that's why if you're able to do internships or even just shadow people or chat with people in the industry to understand, okay, what do you actually do? So you're a geologist or an engineer or a surveyor in the field. What do you actually do on a regular day basis? So if you don't like field work or you love field work, you want to make sure and try to explore what you actually like and try to find something similar there.
I have a couple other things to add there too. If it is your first job too, like you don't have to be too horribly worried about like, is this going to be the thing you want to do for the rest of your life? Because chances are it's not, right? That's why a lot of people only stay at a job for a couple years before they move on and try something else. So like, yeah, you want to try to find something that's going to be a good fit, but remember, you're not like marrying the job. You're not stuck with it forever. So if you think like, maybe this is a good fit, go ahead and shoot for it. And then, maybe a couple years down the road, what you want in life changes and you want to have some kind of different direction in your career. It's okay to change. It's never too late. So don't be afraid of that. The other thing too, I would say is think about your personal values and what matters to you just outside of your just professional life. Like for me personally, I really care about the environment. And people say, well, you're a mining engineer, you're in the mining industry. Like, what do you mean you're an environmentalist? Well, I wouldn't want to work for a company that had a really bad track record of environmental stewardship. So, like research the company's positions on social issues or environmental issues and like the lands that they operate on, like how do they treat the people who own those lands? Like find stuff that aligns with your personal values, and that's how you know it'll be a good fit.
And doing that research is key because then when you're able to, if you get to the interview stage, you can bring that stuff up, right? Like, I know when early on, a few of the companies I applied for were exactly because of the way that they handled themselves in the community. They actually back themselves up with the environmental laws and actually follow through with those things. So, cool. And then our last question, it looks like, unless anyone else has some that they're typing up, is humor okay to use in the interview process? So again, we'll each kind of answer. I definitely think it's important, but that's my personality, right? Life is tough. We have challenges. If we can't use humor on a regular day basis, I don't want to be a part of that team. But your humor should be appropriate and kind of productive, right? So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would second that. I mean, when they interview you, they're obviously looking to see if you're a professional and like if you have the technical skills and if you're a good communicator and all these things. But they also want to know like could they get a beer with you after work? Because you do form friendships with the people you work with. They become some of your closest friends, especially if you do work in a town or something that's like really predominantly mining focused. Like if you are in a mining community, they want to know like they can be friends with you too. So, humor is a good way to express that, but just, try to make sure that it's tasteful or appropriate. You don't need to like open up with a joke or something, but just, if an opportunity presents itself and it seems appropriate, that's fine. It also maybe depends too where you are in the interview process, because some companies will do like a phone interview with you, and that's, you probably want to be a little more serious. But then if they're going to do an in-person interview, or like some interviews I've gone to have been like a dinner interview, so they like take you out to dinner and like, it's really just kind of like a get to know you. That's where it's definitely more appropriate to use more humor and just kind of show who you are and what your personality is like just outside of your professional box that you put yourself in.
Yeah, great point. Because they normally will go through interviews where you have meet with HR on the phone interview, then they call you in for like an in-person, and then either during that same time they have you kind of meet the team, and yeah, you definitely want it and be who you are, right? If you are not, don't try to be funny if that's not really who you are, and just try to be as natural as possible and keep it light and fluffy, right? So these are all good discussions, and hopefully this is not the end of the discussion. I don't see any other questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But we do want to make sure that you have our contact information, and you will get a recording of this. So if you want to revisit or have additional questions, please do not be shy. So thank you so much for all attending. So if you have any, again, if you have any other questions, you can email either Anne or myself, or you can also email us at support, or you can use, we can email you guys the university email address as well. But Anne and I are the main people on the support team for university, so let us know, or you can give us a call here. But with that, on behalf of the Maptek team, we really appreciate your time and energy, and we're really excited to kind of see what you guys do with these new skills. And don't be a stranger, alrighty? Well, thank you so much. This concludes the webinar today. Thank you.